Lizzie, how's it going? Lovely to have you on the podcast again. Just and the listeners don't really need to know this, but just we'll just tell them anyway. But this is our kind of third attempt at trying to record because we did start chatting a few weeks ago and then we had some tech issues. And then last week you had some horrible flooding and third time
Yeah,
lucky we're gonna make this work. So thank you for coming on the show.
it's finally happened. The stars have aligned. Um, but I am expecting where I am to flood almost immediately. So if I'm looking around, I'm just double checking.
It would be flooded at any moment. And where are you speaking from us to us from today? Like you did you say you were in Winchester?
Yeah, so we've got 2 nights at the Winchester Theatre Royal, before a short break of a couple of days in the tour, and then we're off up north. We're going to Coventry and lots of other different places on our tour. So yeah, it's nice. And when you get to stay somewhere a few days, you do kind of get to see a bit of the local area because we're often sort of in the back of a theatre, out the back of a theatre, in a van. So you see a lot of motorways, but not necessarily a lot of the cities where we go. So yeah,
Mm.
it's lovely. Very charming. I've seen a lot of bunting. I'd say more bunting than you'd expect to see of a city. But yeah, very lovely.
I always found the word, I don't know why, but the word bunting always amuses me. It's just such a strange word, and quite a
It's
peculiar thing. Yeah, just a little.
it's very quaint, isn't it? Bunting.
Mm.
Bunting and ginger beer.
I suppose we should actually introduce you to the listeners. So, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Of course, you know you're on tour with Murder She. Is it Murder She Didn't Write? It's called.
Yeah, Murder She Didn't Write. We didn't write it because it's completely unscripted. So yes, I'm Lizzy Skrzypiec. I'm director and performer in Murder She Didn't Write, also known as Detective Agatha Crusty, if I'm solving the crimes rather than causing them. Um, and yeah, we're on tour of the UK, but I'm also a TV questions producer in part of my life. So, but I've recently moved over into sort of a lot more theatre, which I've been doing for many years. So yeah, it's a juggle.
No, thank you for introducing yourself, Lizzie, as well. And of course, you're involved in quite a lot of improv things in Bristol as well. That you've sort of run a company there for that. And it'll be interesting to talk to you about your sort of day job, working on, game shows and question shows and stuff, and talk to you about your sort of your other life moving into theatre as a performer, and how that all works as well. But I suppose a good place to start is, have you always been interested in the arts? Like, what are your sort of early memories? Were you always into creative things? Did you always like game shows? That like was where does that all stem from?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit of a science nerd. Uh, yeah, I was always into my science stuff, and I did like a science to, but I think sometimes when you have these like quite straight-laced pursuits, you kind of desire doing more and more silly stuff maybe in your spare time. So I have always been a bit silly and a bit stupid, I think, in my spare time. So yeah, I've always done a lot of performing really, even throughout university. That was when I discovered improv. And it helps with my slightly terrible memory at times. I think I was enamored with this art form where you didn't have to learn a script or remember any lines. You could just make stuff up, which is my main criticism when I used to do theatre anyway, was it's close enough to the line, which I used to think made directors really upset with me. When you don't say things exactly right, and then there's suddenly this art form where you can say whatever you like. So I think yeah, I've always enjoyed doing it. There's always been a bit of improv to me, I guess. There's a word for it. And then at uni was when I started doing it a lot more with my time, I think. So yeah, I think I've always been a
Mm.
bit silly.
It's interesting with improv because I mean, at my day job, I edit scripts for TV, and it's very structured when you edit a script. And when I've seen quite a lot of improv this week, and what I find interesting about it is, for me watching it, it's like the total opposite. So like there is no rules as such. I know there is an art form and you learn it, and we can talk about what improv is and stuff because we haven't had a lot of people involved in improv on the podcast before, and I think it's very much a growing medium in the UK, and there's things like SNL, coming to the UK as well. And as you're on tour of an
Mm.
improv show, and that's popular and stuff. So it's interesting to talk about. But yeah, it's so like different to what the sort of mediums of art that I maybe grew up watching are in some ways. So no, it's an interesting medium, and it is quite silly, and it must be freeing to be able to be silly like that on stage because I think I probably take myself slightly too seriously to to do improv. I don't know.
You can't take yourself seriously, I think, and do improv. It's not possible, really. It gives you a couple of things. Like there are rules to it, which I can always go into, but like it is very freeing to go on stage and feel comfortable knowing you'll always say something. And when we do our show, we are on stage with five other people, and you're all going to say something. And if you don't say something, someone else will say something. So you sort of always supported in that, I think. And because you're on stage with so many other people, that is five agents of chaos that if you have a plan and want to do something serious, they will ruin it on purpose for fun. And I also find it fun to ruin other people's plans or serious moments. So I think yeah, it makes you less and less serious. Or certainly with our group, with Murder She Didn't Write. So yeah, you go on stage, you might have these ideas of a rich character you might like to play, but someone walks on and they're like, ah, yes, Francesco, the Spanish musician is here, and you go, okay, fine. Or someone will, you come on looking rather regal and they're like, ah, it's grandma, and you suddenly a completely different character. So you've got to roll with the punches, I think.
Mm. No, it's interesting. Well, there's obviously I want to talk to you about your quiz stuff and like working on that side of TV as well, because I think it's interesting. Some of our listeners might want to work in factual or entertainment, that side of things. But while we're sort of on improv, I think it's an interesting thing because we had someone who's like started a company in Glasgow, the Glasgow Improv Theatre, and we had them on last week on the show. Who knows what order these episodes are going out in, so that might not have actually dropped for the listeners yet. Who knows? But what was interesting to talk about was the medium itself, as I touched on. It's a growing medium. So, just for any listeners that might not know much about improv, because I do think in the UK there's quite a stereotype of it. We think of it as an Americanized comedy form, and a lot of people have only seen it maybe on TV or like have a very vague understanding of it. So, I suppose in very simple terms, like how would you describe improv?
So yeah, it's well for us it's unscripted theatre, so we go on a stage with no idea what's going to happen. There are sort of a number of rules which you abide by. Sort of say yes, commit to the world. You make your stage partner look good and stuff like that, and you always build yes and. And as long as you tend to adhere to those rules, you'll probably do a good scene. But yeah, it's going on stage and acting and reacting when you don't know what's going to happen. So you can take it down a more theatrical route if you like we try to, or you could take it down a more comedy route, and there's sort of more scenes. And if you've seen stuff like Whose Line Is It Anyway or anything like that, then you're sort of seeing it in its short form, like sketchy context. But we take it in the form where we do a whole play, we do a whole murder mystery.
Mhm.
So you wouldn't come on and be like, "Boo, boo, boo, my name is the crazy shop owner, Mr. Big Lips, and I've got, whatever." You've got to have a deeper character that lasts the whole show.
Mhm.
So you'll sort of you've got less of these gag characters and stuff that's a bit deeper. Um, I think so. Yeah, that's what it is to us. That's improv.
Yeah. And have you sort of found yourself sort of starting at uni and continuing to do it afterwards and now doing it more professionally? Do you think it has grown as a medium? Do you think it's become more popular and you know
Well, in the time that I've been doing it, I've started to see more of it on the West End, and I've started to see more of it on TV. So going by that, I'd say yes. So there's lots of like other improv groups that have sort of paved the way that like Showstoppers, they do an improvised musical. They're on the West End. You've got Ostentatious that do improvised Jane Austen novels. They're on the West End, and you had Murder in Successville, which was an
Hmm.
improv format on BBC Three, and I
Very
think
popular, isn't
yeah, and Whose Line's still been going. So there's And even at the Fringe, you start to see the Edinburgh Fringe is something we do every year. You start to see more and more improv shows each year, and they return and they're bigger and they're filling bigger venues. So I would say from that aspect, yeah, it's growing and it's growing in popularity. At the beginning of every one of our shows, I ask if people have either seen our show or an improv show before. And over the years, the cheers have got bigger and bigger, even in some of the most unusual places where you think there might not be a lot of improv, but actually people have still heard of it. So I would say it's growing, yeah.
How long have you been doing murder shooting right now for? Like it's you've been to the Fringe a few times. Is this how many years are you on for this show now?
For this show, we're probably nearing 13 years,
What? What?
which is,
I've clearly
and I
overlooked
think
that in my research, to be fair, Liz. I didn't quite realize it was that long. That's mad.
I know I'm actually old, so it is true.
I've just done a backhanded compliment somehow, I feel, but no, it's a
It's
long
fine.
time.
So yeah, we've been doing it a long time. This will be our 11th Edinburgh Fringe with the show, and obviously there was a couple of years off for COVID. So yeah, that's a long time to be doing the same show. It's got to be enjoyable, otherwise you wouldn't do it, right?
Is it the
So
same
yeah.
team that you've always done it with, or is it sort of swapped throughout the years? Is it like sort of changed and adapted?
It's changed a bit, but there are some people that have been in it since the beginning. So I've been in it since the beginning, as has Steve, and Caitlin has been in. So there three of us from the beginning, some of us for about 6 or 7 years. So, there's some new people as well. But even when I say new people, I'm still talking in numbers of years. So we're incredibly close and we are a group of friends as much as we are a group of actors, I would say.
Which is important, and I think again what I like about the medium, um, is that you have to be, I mean, teamwork's important across the arts and collaboration's important across the arts. I don't think you can make a career in this industry without being able to get on with people, not being an arsehole and be able to work as a team. But I do think particularly in something like improv, you need to work as a team, don't you? Because you kind of like saving each other on stage all the time. It's like, it's, I suppose, like that in theatre as well, but I think particularly in this, you have to be very trusting because you have to trust somebody to take you on a, take a show in a specific direction, etc.
Oh, exactly. And also, we do stuff on stage to purposely bring enjoyment to each other. So, if you're going to make a joke, why not make a joke that really makes your scene partner almost break character? So, yeah, each member of Murder She Didn't Write has, things they enjoy, places that they're from, and you just want to sort of make them laugh, really. And also, we do pimp each other. So, pimping is a thing where you might be like, oh, grandfather, sing us that famous song you love to sing, or something like that. And suddenly the person on stage has to sing a song or something like that. So we often try and pimp each other with things that we know that they'll enjoy, or we know that they won't enjoy if we're being mischievous.
No, that is always fun. What's the sort of, have you ever pushed it? What's like the furthest you did maybe ever pushed it on stage? Have you ever managed to get like a co-performer to like do something a bit mental or?
People have done it to me, so we've had a few interesting ones, but one was where my dear friend Peter Baker. I played this sort of woman of the manor. She was pretty old and had unusual habits. And then Peter brought on my midnight snack and handed it to me and was like, "Oh, midnight snack, madam," and that was a candle. So I was like, "Challenge accepted." So I ate a candle on stage.
Very
Um,
dedicated.
Yeah, it was gross. It was really
Mm.
gross. I had red wax between my teeth for hours after that show. I was like picking out. And we sort of sometimes pimp each other to speak different languages or yeah, or say that in Latin or something like that. And depending on who it is, will depend on how much they enjoy that specific pimp.
Hmm. Well, we'll talk about the show and the dates and stuff in a bit more detail. I want also kind of want to ask you where you're from and how that's also influenced you as a creative person. I'm always interested in people where they, their origin story, where they grew up, and how it's like had an impact on where they are now.
Yeah, I'm from Basildon in Essex, so there's not a thriving arts culture there. There is a hell of an industrial estate which has a big Nando's and a nightclub, which got me through my master's through giving me various jobs and stuff. But no, there's not a big arts culture there, but it's near London, so I used to sometimes travel in to sort of get various bits of culture. Um, but yeah, so I think you sort of I had to sort of reach out to find it because yeah, there wasn't a lot going on in my local area. So although we do, yeah, so I wonder how that sort of influenced who I am today. I don't know really. Although I did grow up on stuff like your Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and Monty Python and sort of French and Saunders, Brian Laurie. So a lot of sketch and stuff. I always used to listen to uh, bits and bobs like that and watch that on the TV. So TV was a big part of my comedy bones, I think.
It's interesting how much sketch, stand up, and improv all tie into each other as well, because they are very different, but they are kind of all they share a lot of some overlapping similarities. Like, so it's interesting that watching stuff like that would influence your own performance and style and stuff as well.
Oh yeah, I sure like there were some very sort of silly characters that would absolutely fit in to sort of a Monty Python sketch or something like that. And I think that builds your idea of what comedy is. And it was also nice to see that you maybe not to be disrespectful to any of those works because they have a special place in my heart, but it was nice to see you don't have to be so great at acting to do some of this stuff and that actually you just have to have the enjoyment there. So
Mm.
one of the things I used to love is when Peter Cook made Dudley Moore laugh in and break character in a sketch. And I'd be like, that is so unprofessional and so funny. And I used to love it. So I used to sometimes watch Dudley Moore chuckling into a sandwich or something, playing these two old men on a bench. And I would be like, oh, I can't wait to, I want to try and make someone else break character or someone
Mm.
try and make me break character. So yeah, I would say
There is
that.
something very like it's just joyous about watching someone laugh either at themselves or from someone else on stage. Because obviously, even if you're invested in a show, that it's just I don't know, it makes like seeing someone laughing because and getting so into their own thing is just it's very enjoyable. And I think most audiences are quite forgiving of that. They don't mind like they're invested in the show, but they don't mind if somebody's laughing as well. They're all having a good time.
I hope so. Well, I also think if you're watching an improv show, you're watching two shows, right? You're watching the
Mm.
show, the characters, and the murder. Well, for us, it's a murder mystery, and they're watching that. But they're also watching five improvisers, well, six including the pianist, seven including our tech, who are making stuff up on stage. And sort of there's the interpersonal stuff there that we're doing to sort of throw each other under the bus or make surprise each other and make each other laugh. So they're also enjoying that level of the theatre, I think, which is almost like sport, I think, sometimes, oh, how will they deal with that comment? What will they say to this? So I think, yeah, you're watching two shows.
No, for sure. I'm also curious, like being in the scene and stuff. How do you feel about something like SNL coming to the UK? Like, do you think that'll be good for the UK? Do you think it will be good for the scene? Do you think it might work here and stuff? I know you also work in entertainment on TV as well, so you might have like an opinion from that side of things too.
Well, I hope we'll get to watch it because it is on Sky.
Yeah,
So
A1.
it, it's a shame. I'd have loved to have seen it on one of the terrestrial channels that you get for
Mm.
free. Um, but yeah, I mean, any vehicle like that is going to be opportunity. So I think it'd be great. I'd love to see how it turns out. One of the things I dislike about some American improv, and I must say there's some incredible American improv, but a lot of people used to see it, perhaps this is a data view, as a way to get to SNL, as
Mm.
just a stepping stone. And that's not, hey man, that's my whole art form. That's not a stepping stone, that's a valid thing in itself. So a lot of people just do improv to get somewhere else, like a course. And
Mm.
actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's a whole thing that you can go and see the theatre, and it's a great experience. So I think I can't see it having that big an impact on improv, killing the art form. But yeah, I think it'd be good. I'd love to see how it turns out, and I hope. they keep it well, they will, they'll keep it free and fun, I think.
Yeah, and hopefully give new performers a chance as well. I mean, it was on the Rest as Entertainment. They did a segment about it, and Richard Osman seemed pretty confident that they would it would be very good to sort of give grassroots comics and performers and improvisers like a chance to maybe be on telly for the first time and not just have the same names. So fingers crossed that it can do that because I do think we need more mediums like that. Even sketches in the UK, we do. I don't. There isn't a huge amount of sketch shows. I mean, there's a few smaller ones in Scotland. There's a few, shows that you referenced a few earlier. Even they feel like some of the more recent ones, like you had like Mitchell and Webb and stuff, but there's not a lot of sketch stuff really in the mainstream.
No, and it's a sort of narrow route in. If I mean, not everyone does comedy to get on TV. Some people just do it for to
Mm.
perform live and that vibe of it. But there were a few routes into TV, and you could either do a bit of Mock the Week. You could be one of the less famous guests on Mock the Week. You could be one of the less famous guests on Have I Got News for You, or you could be one of the less famous guests on sort of another panel show, really. And those panel shows were a way of you condensing your entire comedy career into 5 minutes. You try and get all your gags out on TV, and hopefully that would give you another TV thing. But not all comedy is stand up. Like you said, like a lot of it's sketch, some of it's improv, some of it's just sort of clowning, and there's not a space for that to
No.
uh, enter television. So yeah, SNL could be a great other way to not just have people say their 5 minute condensed set, but actually to, not that I'm sort of discrediting that, that's worked incredibly well, but also to broaden it out and give other performers a bit of screen time that don't just have the sort of the gags. They've got other types of comedy.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the other one of the other sort of routes in is radio, and radio also is great, and it's a brilliant medium. So is podcasting, but I suppose it's limiting as well because you can't. Maybe improv and sketch are harder to do on the radio than normal comedy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one, and that's not to mention all the other barriers that exist. Like it's a very hard time to work in the arts if you don't come from some sort of financial privilege at the moment. It's really hard to pay your rent and
Yeah.
work in the arts. And
Oh my goodness. I could go on for days about how it's yeah. I mean, we used to put our own money up when we did early fringe. And you know, they say never risk your own money, but it was a lot for us. We'd put all of our savings, all sort of back then there were seven of us, all putting of everything we had into a show. Not everyone's got savings. So, not that we had a lot either. So I think it's yeah. There'll be people out there where the risk is less. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Whereas we had to make money, so we were flying day and night because we knew that if we didn't make our money back, we were kind of screwed. So and some of these fringes and comedy festivals have got more and more and more expensive. The Edinburgh Fringe being one of them.
that's crazy.
Accommodation
It's just ridiculous. You're
is
pricing, we're pricing people out of the arts effectively, and yeah, I feel like it's been. Some of my listeners might think it's been a bit of a bleak year, and I hope they don't think I've gone all cynical. But I do think it's important to talk about these issues, and we have to just be honest with people. I think there's a magical thinking in this industry where it's like you'll make it, and you can, everyone's going to be, you just keep working hard, and I think that does bloody help. Obviously, you need to work hard and put the graft in, but like I don't think we should just always lie to people either and say that it's that straightforward. I think there's a lot of barriers there, and not everyone has the same risk level as you said. Like, it's easier when you're younger as well to like go, oh well, I'll take a risk and I'll put all my money in. But if you're married or you have a mortgage or have family or you have other circumstances,
mm,
it's really hard to take that risk. So, it's unfortunately, yeah, we're pricing people out of the arts, but it's still good that we have things like the
yeah.
French. I just hope we can go back to what they were kind of meant to be originally. And it's good that people like yourself are
It's
finding
an
ways to be creative about that.
Yeah, well, it's an uncomfortable ride as well. Like when we were doing our first few festivals, we'd all be sharing, like, I don't know, it would be 6 or 7 of us to one bedroom. And we'd there'd be one bed, some sleeping bags, and it would be and a queue for the toilet that was like half an hour long. So it's kind of a grim start. And you're more likely to go through that discomfort with a positive attitude if you've, yeah, got a bit less to lose. Like we were quite young when we were doing that. We were probably fresh out of uni. So I probably wasn't used to the comforts that I am now with my flat and a mortgage and a nice mattress. You know, we were quite happy to go through that discomfort, I think. But we have certainly paid our dues on that. I don't want to share a bedroom anymore with six other people. I'd quite like to. I've got to the age now, I'd quite like to just have my own room.
And then that's not too much to ask for, you know. It's mad how it is, but no, it is a yeah. Hopefully, these sort of opportunities can lead to more chances for people to get into the arts, and yeah, hopefully, I don't know what the solution to the Fringe. I mean, this comes up every year in the run up to it. We have people on to promote stuff for the Fringe and their tours, and it just every year seems to be getting worse. So I honestly don't know what the solution is there. Someone once suggested they do like a big artist village and it's just really cheap, and I think that'd be an amazing idea. It'd be good for the city as well. I think a lot of the locals, I used to live there, lived there for 9 years, but I think a lot of the locals would love that as well because they get quite frustrated with the Airbnb issue and there's a lot of profiteering that
Mm.
goes on. But I want to speak to you, yeah, about your game show stuff and like your background in that. So tell us how you got into doing that and how you ended up sort of working in TV and stuff and entertainment.
Yeah, it was really by chance. I was coming to the end of my biochemistry degree at Bristol, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what to do with my life. As I'm sure is like a normal student thing, right? To have those crises where you're like, oh no, I don't know who I am yet. I'm not a fully formed person. And luckily, I had a friend that recommended a science and media production course as a master's and was like, hey, you'd probably, I was doing improv at the time. I was well, I hopefully still am relatively creative. And they were like, you should do this, yeah, telly course for scientists. I think you'd
Oh,
enjoy it.
I
And
think
I
that's such
read
a
about
neat
it.
course. That's cool. I didn't even know those sort of courses existed, but that's cool.
Yeah, there was one at Imperial College, but there's a couple now about, and I think there's one in Salford. Um, so I did this master's and I learned how to make radio and TV and like curate museum exhibits, and we did a bit of science journalism and stuff like that as well. And I ended up working, and it gave you some work experience. I started working on some documentaries, and then I swiftly grew a bit bored of that, and documentaries were not quite doing it for me in the sense that I was just a young researcher, the sort of doing all of this research on the internet, but never really going to any of these places. So I worked on a show called River Monsters where they film big scary fish
Yeah, I used to see that before.
all around the world in different rivers. Yeah, so but I was never the one that went out, the nerd in the office on the internet. And here's some interesting facts about stingrays. Um, and I grew so tired of that. And I had other friends in TV that worked in different areas that were already in studio, meeting celebrities, doing exciting stuff. Um, and I applied for a role in development um, after doing a bit of work on one show, the sort of the little videos on the one show. And that was when improv really entered my TV world. And I was like, I'm really good with coming up with games. I yes and in brainstorms. I'm a real positive thinker. I can think on my feet as well, and I can take an idea and take it left or right. And they took me on at RDF, and I started working in entertainment development. And that's when I got into quiz and game show from there, coming up with quiz and game show formats. And they just then, I think, a couple of maybe a year back or 2 years back, commissioned Tipping Point. And they were looking for another quiz, and we spent a lot of time working on game shows and other fact ent formats. And from then, I just ended up getting more game show development jobs and then more game show production jobs, which is a really weird sort of sidestep, but I loved it. I had such a passion for the game element that I think I used to, and I love a run through as well. A run through is a performance, an office performance. What better, what better way to spend your day at work than do a run through? I was overjoyed with them. So yeah, I found a real passion with that.
Mm. What was your favorite game that you sort of helped come up with or show that you maybe worked on that?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I was working at Remarkable, uh, we were coming up with Richard Osman's House of Games. So I've come up with a few games for that show, which made it onto the series, which was really fun. So yeah, there was I can't remember the names of any of these things because they all change names by the time you air. Um, but there was one where you sort of had to stand up. Each person was given an answer and you had to sort of stand up if you thought it was you. You were the answer, and there was one where you took someone's name and you had to find the answer within their name and stuff.
That's cool. No, it's an area I don't know a lot about because drama is very different. How like I know you still do a bit of entertainment work as well and stuff, but like how are you finding that part of the industry? Because I sort of know that TV's struggling a lot at the moment, and that area has sort of been hit as well, quite hard, factual and entertainment. I know I've had a lot of cuts and stuff. Have you found it okay? Has it affected you? Do you know people that are sort of out of work and things?
Yeah, loads of people are out of work. Um, and it's so seasonal. There's something with quiz shows, especially. There were lots still being made, which was nice, but there was a quiet period towards the end of 24, where there just didn't be much made. You get periods myself as well, and it's been rough. And you start to question whether you're in the right, whether you're in the right career and what could you possibly do. But it has come back. Luckily, there's been a lot of quiz shows made in 2025 already, so it's been nice to see resurgence a bit. And I've been very lucky with getting work so far. So yeah,
Good. No,
yeah.
I feel you heavily though in that questioning, what the hell am I doing it? No, I feel that a lot just now. The show I work on's actually been cancelled by BBC Scotland, so we'd got till next April and then it's like, well, you know what I mean? So it's a weird time and it's happening across the industry. And again, like I was talking about with the people being praised to the arts, I just think it's important to be honest about that. I don't want, it might appear from the outside that you're smashing it and stuff, but no, everyone's got stuff going on and, it's never always straightforward. How do you cope with the sort of uncertainty of working in this industry? Because obviously you've got loads of different skills and stuff, which probably helps, but are you someone that finds that okay or do you find that tricky?
No, I hate it. How do you cope with it? I have a terrible time. It's like, especially I'm often unemployed in winter. So it's like December, January time, and it gets dark at like 4 p.m. And if you're still in your pajamas at 1 p.m., you're like, Brick, I've only got 3 hours of daylight. So yeah, I absolutely it's the motivation. Um, I guess the only way I found to get around it, and this is not a relatable way, is I booked a holiday in in a time I knew I would be unemployed. So I went away at the beginning of January, and it was nice, although incredibly frightening financially. But maybe that was like the adrenaline rush I needed. Knowing, oh God, can I have this meal out? But no, I cope terribly. I have no advice for anyone. In fact, please give me advice on how to get through any of that uncertainty. It's terrible.
I have a very similar answer. No, completely. I'm not very good at it at all. And but again, I don't think I know this isn't advice, but maybe that is comforting for other people that they are like, okay, it's all right to feel like that way about it. And this is incredibly scary and uncertain. No, for sure. Well, I kind of want to talk to you a bit more about your show then in general, Lizzie. And like, obviously you're on tour just now, and then you're returning to the Fringe. So do you want to give us a bit of, you kind of touched on what the show is a little bit and told us it's improv and it's kind of Agatha Christie and it's like improvised and stuff. But do you want to tell us a bit more about it and also tell us where you're going on to, where people can see it, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So the show's called Murder She Didn't Write. It's an improvised murder mystery, Agatha Christie style, where we make up a completely different murder for you to solve every night. And you're one member of the audience who's chosen at random by the throwing of a hat becomes Jerkins, the detective's sidekick, and they pick where the murder takes place, also who dies and who did it. So they can either pick at random if they want to play along too, although the victim does become pretty apparent about halfway through, or if they want to kill someone off or make someone the murderer, then it's up to them. They can do it, and it's up to the rest of the audience to guess. Hopefully but it's also a comedy. So even if you're not a big murder mystery fan, at the end of the day, it's a comedy show with lots of sort of farcical, fun bits. And yeah, we're on tour, and then we're heading to the Edinburgh Fringe. We're back, our spiritual home. So yeah, we'll be at the Gordon Aikman Theatre, all Fringe, all month, all of August. So yeah, that's the show. We do have dates. I should know them, but I'm not 100% sure where this is going out.
Well, neither am I, to be in all honesty. This is, getting to see behind the curtain, listeners. This is how we, record lots of episodes and then we work out how to release them. But there is links below in the show notes right now. So if you want to go and find out more about Lizzie's show, whenever this is dropping, probably in the next few weeks from recording, but you can find out more about the tour and the Fringe, etc. Go and see the show. You can subscribe and follow, Lizzie and her various companies and shows, etc. on social media as well. All the details are below. And please subscribe to the podcast as well. Yeah, below the classic thing they all do. Babbling a wee bit there.
Hello.
They're used to it. I also, yeah, I want to ask you as well about, because a lot of people listening go to the Fringe, they maybe want to take a show to the Fringe. What are your sort of tips? I mean, we touched on the unaffordability of it earlier, but what would your tips for people that maybe want to take a show to the Fringe be? Or take a show on tour?
Ooh. So book your accommodation early, like really early. We've we've lost accommodation because we've not booked it early enough. Also look after yourself, both mentally and physically. If you're there for the whole month, that's a lot. And I think a lot of performers burn out. I certainly have on my early fringes because you're all excited and you're surrounded by other performers. So you have a few late nights and then wait, look after your mind and body and book accommodation early and um, avoid the Royal Mile. That's an anxiety dream, I think.
To be fair, it's hard to get around the whole city half the time. I wanted to thank you for your answer and your question about the Fringe, but I wanted to sort of ask you about like the biggest lesson you've maybe learned in your career. And I know you've worked in various different aspects of the creative industry as well, from your performing, taking stuff to the Fringe, and also your game show stuff. But like, what would your biggest lesson be so far?
Ooh. I think one of the, and it's something I have to tell myself regularly, is you really are your own harshest critic on the whole. I've done loads of gigs, both in TV and in on stage, and a lot of time you go, well, that was terrible. I'm, they must have noticed that I had, that I had a stain on my top, or I like stumbled over this, or got this wrong. And I kind of think everyone is always focused on what they're doing, and you should kind of be kind to yourself and realize that, yeah, but you're your own, you notice things about you that are rather than other people. So, yeah, and that's translated across in both, yeah, theatre and TV. Be kind to yourself, which is I know very vague, but in an industry where you don't have, there's not a lot of performance review, if you know what I mean, other than actual reviews. It's quite easy to forget that, like, you're doing it. So to be kind to yourself.
I know, yeah, no, completely. I think we are often our harshest critics, and I think as well, you get so caught up in what you're doing is that you forget that 3 years ago you sort of think you say to yourself, if I achieved these things, or if I did this, that would make me happy. And then you do those things, and it doesn't actually make you as happy as you think it would because then you're just thinking of the next thing, or you just think you didn't do it well enough. So it's a really hard, self-fulfilling prophecy almost that yeah, it's really tricky. I struggle with that the most. No matter how much evidence you build for yourself, you can always find a way to be like, nah, wasn't good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Which is madness, really, because you can't do anything 100% perfect all of the time. I mean, that is an improv thing. You'll never be 100% perfect, but it's over. Like each thing is a fleeting moment. I guess you work in the other side. You work because you're in scripted. you're like, yeah. How do you deal with having the permanency of script and film?
Um, I mean, even then though, like once you shoot something on a budget, do you know what I mean, or on a time limit, so sometimes you get the shot. I mean, I'm not really on set too often because I'm behind the scenes more, but like at the end of the day, like you run out of time, the script's as good as it can be, but you'll always something could always be better. Um, Same with the podcast, like you put it out, it exists forever. You know, I listen back to episodes from like 4 years ago and I'm like, Jesus Christ, did I put that out? That's cringy. But at the same time, that's who I was then. And like, you kind of learn and like, I think it's just accepting that it's similar in some ways. It's done. I technically could go back and delete things, I suppose, in the way that you can do with a live performance. But I kind of treat it the same way. Like, it is permanent, but it's done in the sense of like that period of your life, that bit of creativity, like in the same way a show, and it's the experience of it as well. It's a little bit. I think the biggest lesson I've maybe learned in my career so far is that it's actually about enjoying this part of it instead of thinking all the time about what didn't go right or what worrying about the future or I don't know. It's just actually trying to enjoy this part instead of thinking like if I just get to this thing, that'll make me happy. And then you do it, and it doesn't normally. So I think just being like, try and enjoy what this is, but that is really tricky to do. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, we have it with I mean, yeah, none of our, well, and hopefully none of our shows are really ever sort of recorded. So sometimes you have a moment of genius and you have a moment that like you're like, I wish I did that differently. But they're all gone. So you never have the permanency of like a great moment being captured, but you also never have a moment where you're like, I misspoke and said this wrong, or like I didn't say that 100% correctly. And that is also gone. So it's like both sides of that, which I
But I
quite
also
enjoy.
think both those things are equally important in different ways because you learn from the mistakes as much as it's great to do a good moment, but like you need both and both are special as well. That's the whole point in being creative and putting yourself out there. It's both those things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And be happy with both of those things, right?
Yeah, I try to
Happy
be
with
as best you can.
yeah.
Mm. Well, Liz, I've got one more question for you, which is just that we always get our guests to end on sort of wrap up and sort of what their advice maybe would be to someone who wanted to do what they do. So what would your advice be to anyone wanting to either become a performer, tour a show, or maybe they want to go and work in game shows or be a researcher on a documentary like you used to do or anything like that? What would your advice be to them?
Well, my advice is, I mean, I'm a person that came up with a show, cast myself in it, and then continued to tour it around. And I think don't wait for opportunities. You can audition for things and not get them, but you can always start your own thing and put yourself in it. And I think that's also true of TV. If you don't get on one of the schemes or you don't get that job, then it is also fine to make your own. And that is kind of the direction we're going anyway. So you don't have to wait to be recognized by authorities or a certain level. You can just make your own thing. And it's worked for me so far. And it means I haven't had to go to drama school or learn how to act. I can just be funny with my friends on stage and that's sort of equally as valid. And I don't need to sort of yeah, I could just what that's how I've got better and better by doing it myself rather than waiting to be taught or waiting to sort of be accepted.
And you have a
Because
science degree as well, which is a bit different for a lot of people working in the arts.
yeah, if there's ever a scientist character in a murder mystery, I love it. I love to be the scientist. So I was a scientist on gluten, I think, in a most recent show, a French gluten scientist. And yeah, it's just enjoyable to make stuff up.
You'd found a niche market for yourself to aim at, so no, it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But yeah, my biggest advice is you don't wait for opportunities. Just make it and have fun doing it because otherwise, yeah, there's not enough opportunities, so you've got to make them yourself, I think.
Mm. And if you're going to share a room with six people at the Fringe, you may as well try and enjoy the shows you're doing and all that stuff, eh?
Exactly. Why don't you just do it with your friends? It's way more fun.
Well, Lizzie, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you sticking it, and we made it work third time round and stuff as well. Very quickly before we wrap up, I'll just remind people there's obviously links to all the shows and your work in the show notes. But is there anything you'd seen or you want to plug or shout out other shows that people you know and like? You want to quickly plug while you're here?
Oh my goodness. Who else do I recommend? I always like the incredibly talented Elf Lyons. Um, she always brings a show up and it's always truly sublime. There's a lot of other great improv out there. And if you don't see Murder She Didn't Write, please give other improv another go because they're so broad and I think it's really good to see. Oh God, I should probably name something specific, but Jacuzzi are always great. Um, oh my goodness, there's spontaneous spontaneous Potter are really fun. Oh my goodness, who else is going? Yeah, loads, loads. But yeah, I would recommend if you're going to the Fringe to take a punt on something new and just see.
Brilliant. Well, Lizzie, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it, and good luck with the rest of the tour. And I look forward to seeing your show at the Fringe as well.
Thanks. It was lovely chatting to you. It was much less scary than I thought it was going to be.
Very glad. I'm very glad.